of the grad thesis exhibition talks here in the theater. Tomorrow, starting at 11, there'll be gallery talks in the exhibition in the nave by a lot of students who'll be talking about their work right there with it. We have 4 really special speakers tonight, and we're kicking off with one of my favorite locals, Mike Caroselli. By the way, for those of you who are confused, this is the Graduate Program in Design thesis events, and if you're confused about that, we have 2D, 3D, and interaction people, but they all kind of grow a little hyphy and reach out to each other and become transdisciplinary designers. So you'll see most of these theses have a lot of design research and strategic thinking in common, but then boundaries may start to wiggle around a little bit, and that's what we like. That's what we hope for. So this young man is Mike Caroselli. Mike grew up in Manhattan Beach, and he majored in history at UCLA. He spent 6 years in marketing and advertising in Los Angeles and lived to tell about it. And then he came to San Francisco to pursue a career in industrial design. He's worked for Council Furniture, Meyerhofer, and currently at Mountain Hardware. His thesis work explores the concept of authentic design within local beach culture. As the 60-year-old lady on the boogie board, I'm the guy he does not want to see on the break. Welcome, Mike.
Thanks, Brenda. I do like seeing Brenda out in the water if I ever do, so it's not a problem. My thesis is titled "Built Local Tough," and my journey really begins at the beach. Here I am in '83 or '82 with my parents. I grew up in Manhattan Beach, like Brenda said, doing everything: surfing, hanging out, doing junior lifeguards. I was at the beach all the time. And I knew that I needed to find something for my thesis that really hit home for me and that I could kind of spring off of. And the beach was the perfect fit. I looked around the beach in our design research and development class and kind of saw, okay, who are these characters down at the beach? You know, you got the tourists, you know, you have the family, you got the druggies, got the burnouts. Who do I want to kind of design products for? And I kind of focused on this one. I think they're the kings of the beach, the local surfers. They are tied into the community. They grew up in their community. They surf the best breaks. They get all the best waves. They know everybody. They're kind of keyed into the scene. So I figured that they'd be a kind of an interesting target demographic, as we might call it, or a consumer that we want to look at, or a user. So I'm personally a local surfer in Manhattan Beach down in Los Angeles, and I don't partake in a lot of the localism that I'll get into. But in Santa Cruz, where my wife's from, I spent a lot of time there, and I'm an outsider there. So coming to NorCal, you know, I don't get the hey, what's up, bro? I get the stink eye look. So I wanted to know kind of more about this scene and look at it from a design research perspective and kind of see if there's ways for me to, as a product designer, to introduce new products. So my research started with just kind of looking at surfing. Okay, we have this ideal of one man, one wave, just cruising. You know, he's stepping out, he's doing some fancy footwork out there, Pleasure Point. But, you know, this is what the reality is. You know, you're out there, it's kind of a war. You're hassling guys, elbowing each other to get waves. There's a finite number of waves coming through, and you need to make sure that you get the most, that you have the best fun, most fun out there. So there's kind of creates this situation where you have this thing called localism. And Matt Warshaw, the great surf historian, calls, you know, it's something about threat and intimidation and occasionally violence, you know, by these people who live in this community against these outsiders. John, a surfer from New Jersey who moved out here for school, you know, he says, I hate those guys. There's a lot of different aspects of localism. One of them is kind of T-shirts and clothing, and the red on the west side and blue on the east side, in Santa Cruz at least. You can also see it in surf graffiti, locals only, death to invaders, no tourists. Also in the water, you see it in confrontations, people snaking each other, which means taking off in front of the wave and not allowing them to enjoy the ride. Then you can also see it on the beach in altercations and fights, things like that. But 95% of the time, this is what localism is. Stink eye in the top left. It's not a hey, how's it going? Welcome to the beach. It's what are you doing here, outsider? On the right side, you see it's right top there. It's kind of a territoriality that's accompanied with a stink eye. You know, they're always there, hanging out, drinking tall boys, and if you kind of come into their scene, you're going to get the stink eye. In the water, it's evidenced in just not being able to get any waves. They're going to paddle around you, snaking you, like I said, and stink eye, calling you tranny. In Santa Cruz, calling you a tranny is a short for transplant, someone who's moved into Santa Cruz. This is something that's specifically directed a lot of my friends who went to UC Santa Cruz and were good surfers, but outsiders. So they wouldn't get any waves, and they kind of hate these locals too. In the surf world, there is a hierarchy. The locals are at the top. You know, they are kind of the ingrained. They paid their dues. They're in the community. Right underneath that is Groms, so short for grommet. And these are just the young kids who are locals growing up in the scene. They're kind of paying their dues. They get hazed by the older locals. Whip snap with the towels, things like that, a little bit worse. Right underneath the Groms are rippers, and these are just good surfers who, you know, if you're a good enough surfer, you can integrate into any surfing lineup around the world fairly easily. You still have to pay a lot of respect to the Groms and the locals, but you'll get respect that you've paid your dues in the ocean by becoming a good surfer. At the bottom of the barrel are kooks like this gentleman. I'm thinking he's from Finland or something. He's buying into the kind of surf culture, you know, supporting the local Santa Cruz economy, but at the same time, he would be at the bottom of the pecking order just based on his kind of style choices and paying for the top of the line board and not paying his dues. For me in Santa Cruz, I'm hoping to slot myself in at the Ripper. You know, I will see how well my surfing goes. You know, but I'm an okay surfer, and hopefully I can kind of pay my dues over the years and get to the point where I'm at least semi-respected by the locals. Let's get a little bit more into the local surfers. For the most part, male, 14 to 60 years old. Their life really revolves around the beach. If they're not surfing, they're hanging out, they're talking to their friends, checking the waves. They're really ingrained in the community. This is something that goes across not just their friends, but also their jobs and kind of their entire lifestyle. Additionally, they're family focused. They do a lot of things, bringing their kids to the beach, going on camping, going on hikes with other families. And there's a uniform local style that I'll get into. Let's meet some of them. Marty, he works right upstairs here at CCA in the CCA shops, and he says, "I don't surf, I'm just a poser." That is completely not true. He just said that to kind of be humble and not let people kind of put him in the surfer mentality that's kind of prevalent in culture right now with, you know, the kind of the Spicoli or stoner surfer. The local surfers view themselves more as hardworking gentlemen, like Marty here. He's a dedicated surfer. He comes in late to he has a late shift, at the CCA shops, so he can surf more. Here's Lars. He's a South Bay local down in Los Angeles, a lifeguard, a surfer, and a diver with this giant halibut. Dang, that's a big one. And he's owned 6 boats and has a ton of gear, and he's kind of keyed into the scene down in LA, knowing when the whales are out. He'll go out and take boats or paddle out, and enjoys diving and fishing as well. Bryson, he's a harbor master down in Santa Cruz. He had to deal with all the tsunami kayaks washed up all around. He was up for 4 nights straight. He only drinks Budweiser and PBR, and only wears Ben Davis pants. And he is a surfer and paddler and really good surfer and a Santa Cruz local. Here he is barbecuing out at a Big Sur with the Budweiser 30-pack in the back, as you'll see. The activities, like I said, revolving around the beach, things like skateboarding along the cliff, surfing. A lot of this in the bottom left, a lot of hanging out and talking. You see the guy in the Santa Cruz shirt, the guy in the O'Neill shirt, both local companies. Checking the waves, but really they're just being comfortable in the community. Again, there's Bryson barbecuing down at Big Sur with his family. For work, again, part of the community, things that are involved with connections and people you know, things like construction, firemen, surf shops, boats. Everything kind of is these more traditional kind of macho jobs or tough guy jobs. Getting into the style a little bit, the first element is working class. Going along with these kind of construction jobs, there's an element of, you know, Dickies and Carhartt and work boots and flannels that are it's pretty across the board. Everyone wearing this, and playing into it a little, digging a little deeper into it. In these kind of beach communities, a big enemy is gentrification and the influx of kind of rich urban people. And I think this is part of a reaction against that and not wanting to be perceived as a rich outsider who's just buying in, as someone who's kind of worked their way up. Even in rich communities down in Los Angeles like Palos Verdes, the local surfers will wear this working class style. The other element or the second element of the local style is just kind of the classic beach. You know, your sandals, your Vans, jeans, and hats. Just kind of live that casual living that, hey, I'm not part of your rat race society. I'm just going to cruise. The last element is kind of a tricky one. You know, it's the Vado gang element. Involved with this localism is an element of threat, and they do want to keep a distance between the insiders and the outsiders. And so you see the baggy clothes, uniformity, flannels, khaki, and a lot of tattoos. In Santa Cruz, this has caused some problems actually recently because, like I mentioned earlier, the west side has traditionally worn red shirts, east side has traditionally worn blue. With the influx of Norteño and Sereno gangs in the community, this has caused some confusion about who's part of the local kind of surf gangs and who's part of these real gangs. And a couple of local surfers have gotten killed in the last few years for wearing red shirts and claiming west side. So this is a real deal to some extent and something that Santa Cruz is dealing with. Like I said, the working styles, working class, classic beach, and Vado gangs coming together, this local style, which is hardworking, hard playing, and intimidating. So I looked at these elements and tried to figure out, okay, as a product designer, where do I fit in? You know, all this stuff is so classic, all this stuff is so like, you know, it's been there, it's part of this long culture, tradition. Like, how can I create something new? I mean, I don't want to, like, so much of product design is cell phones and kind of new technologies and things like that. And like, I'm not interested in that. I wanted to get to something that was a little bit more meaningful. So I wanted to work in this local style, and I saw there might be an opportunity in backpacks. Right now, there are a lot of backpacks out there, surf backpacks, but for the most part, people are using the one on the bottom right, the classic JanSport Super Break backpack you get for about $40. It has ballistic nylon and kind of a fake leather base, and just it's tough enough. I've had this one since middle school, and it's worked great. So I think it kind of fits in with the low-key, casual vibe of the local surfers. I looked at surf backpacks. There are a lot out there, but they're all kind of focused at this kind of kook surfer who's more of a Orange County, wannabe Orange County inlander with the hot colors, graphics, things like that. So there's good stuff. They're waterproof. There's good organization. They're comfortable. There's my dad modeling it. Wow, he's really cool. There's also a lot of bad stuff though. Like I said, they're too technical with too many straps. They're kind of everyone like Decline and these other companies are looking at trying to infuse this element of, okay, tons of straps, and how does this all work together? And it just doesn't really vibe with the local style. They're also too small. I think this is just basically because these packs are really computer packs with like a surf wax comb inserted. So they're really day packs that have kind of this little element that kind of trying to make them cool. And for the most part, they're kind of silly for a grown man, a local surfer. I looked a lot at the bike and outdoor communities. These are bike and outdoor backpack industries. These are two areas where there's a lot of growth, a lot of enthusiasm, a lot of innovation, especially in the bike industry. I was also lucky enough to get an internship, as Brenda mentioned, with Mountain Hardware over spring, where I learned a lot about construction and materials and how a backpack can really work. So the good stuff about these bike and outdoor bags, they're waterproof again, rugged, very rugged, and a large load. That was the main thing I was seeing in these messenger-inspired backpacks is the expansion and contraction and expansion capabilities of them for having these messengers who are riding around with all this crazy stuff on them. I thought that was a good idea for kind of some of the issues going along with the surfers. So a lot of bad stuff too. You know, there's too technical, like the surf packs. They're loud colors and just overall incorrect style. It just doesn't, like I said, doesn't vibe with the local surf style. I looked at wear points, and this is where my lifeguard and harbor master friends were great to come in because these guys really use their bags. There's a spray grip on all the boats with its really abrasive, almost sand-like grip tape texture. It tears away at all the different parts of the bags. And I was able to kind of figure out where I needed to add some reinforcement, especially zippers, corrosion, and seam points. I also started looking at, I was calling them products or tough products, and kind of things that weren't necessarily related with the local servers, but kind of in the same vibe. And I was trying to think of like tough and American and starting to throw these words around. And I went through my dad's garage and was able to look at kind of his axes and his saws, and I was asking people, what's a tough product? And they're kind of pointing me in these directions, and started just kind of categorizing and taking pictures of a lot of these things like Jorgensen clamps and meat hooks and borax, and just kind of, and I really was confused about, okay, what is it about these things that makes them kind of appealing and kind of classic? And I needed some more time to kind of figure that out. I looked at the surf gear, and interviewed a bunch of my friends and got surveys about the different gear. You know, some of them they're saying like, oh, I always bring bourbon on every surf trip. Oh, I always bring beans. And everyone had these kind of random stuff. But for like, I was asking for like a day trip to like a 3-day surf camping out of your car trip. And there's the dry pack. You know, dry for your, your food and your dry clothes. There's a wet for your wetsuit and hood and booties and leash and towel, things like that. And there's also a necessity for a small pack, like your keys and wallet and other things you don't want to be fumbling around for. So this is where I started my design process and actually physically making backpacks. Bag number 1. This is my first backpack I ever made. And here I am in the grad studio, completely using the back room and shredding it apart. I started with kind of some rough sketches and then moved quickly into a butcher paper mock-up there on the top right. That was one thing I've learned of my internships at Meyerhofer and at Mountain Hardware is that with fabric and with things that move and with products in general, getting to a physical model as fast as possible is very useful in your design process. So I tried to get everything kind of going quickly, and I got this bag number 1. So there's a lot of good things, well, maybe one good thing. It's extra large size, that's great. But it's just too flimsy. I used the khaki pant type material, and it was just, when you turn to the side, it flopped one way or the other. It also had silly colors. I was going for this American palette with the red and the blue, and it just turned out ridiculous. And also just wasn't ergonomic. I didn't understand enough about ways you make backpacks right, so I just put a little hard piece of masonite in the middle of your back, and I thought, hey, there's the back plate. It sucks. So it sucked enough in the grad studio that I decided, no way am I taking this out into the real world, so no testing for bag number 1. Bag number 2, I took that classic JanSport bag and I made it bigger, and I took off the marsupial pouch on the back to make it a little cleaner, try to fit in more with the aesthetic, and I used some asymmetries. And this is also when I introduced my brand name, Tonnage. And this name came through a lot of different iterations, and I feel like it's kind of hits home in terms of shipping and bringing heavy stuff and carrying things, and just kind of a real smooth name. So I've carried that through throughout the rest of my design process. I also put on USA underneath it. This was something I was starting to figure out might be of interest in. Looking at these companies like Dickies and Carhartt and Ben Davis, like an American element might appeal to these local surfers. Bag number 2 was tested on a 2-mile beach hike, also a surf trip down to Santa Cruz. It was not ergonomic at all. It's just too small and too flimsy. The feedback, sent it out to some of my friends and got their feedback. They said it was okay style. It's had its moments, but the materials were off. You can see the transparency, the towel through the bag there. Transparency just doesn't give you a tough vibe, does it? And also the geometry was just off. The straps are too short. Their straps are too high, and overall it just didn't sit well on your back. Bag number 3. After bag number 2, I really wanted to make a comfortable backpack, so I looked long and hard at the outdoor packs and my Mission Workshop Vandal pack and took that apart, actually, to get kind of, okay, I need to have some sort of vertical stays. This is the fiberglass on the right there, and then also kind of a plastic back panel that will roll to your back, but then also create a transfer to load from the top to the bottom. I integrated this with some foam and some padding, and it has a kind of a cylindrical shape with the top loading and a tarp flap there. I was kind of getting like a corrugated aluminum shed type vibe, and I thought that would kind of fit in with it, the local surfers. I tested it on a street walk or to the beach, a hike to the beach, also a 3-mile forest hike with my wife's family, and then also a surf trip down to Santa Cruz. This is very ergonomic. This pack fits great. It was okay size. It still couldn't fit everything that I really wanted to fit. Feedback from the local surfers and designers, they felt I was getting a lot closer with the colors and the style and the form. But this is where stuff got a little tricky. For all intents and purposes, this bag is as tough as you need it. The materials are robust enough, it's waterproof, but when I gave it to people, they're like, oh, this feels flimsy. Oh, this seems like it would rip. I'm like, that's Cordura. This is tarp. This is waterproof. This is completely robust materials. Like, there's no way. And they're like, oh. Well, it feels like it's weak. So bag number 4, I decided I just need to build the crap out of this bag. I need to make a tough bag, and I succeeded. The bag number 4, I created it out of cotton duck canvas, and I waxed it with kind of Civil War era waterproofing technologies of beeswax and heat gun. And, well, the heat gun's not really Civil War, but so it's beeswaxed. I used military spec webbing for the binding panel, so really abrasion resistant at all the edges. And then I also used a liner of recycled tarp material, outdoor vinyl tarp material. It's actually too tough. So I tested it in a 2-mile jungle hike. I threw it in the ocean, carry-on luggage. I had my daughter in there. Man, it's a big size. It was a large size. It was great. We went on a trip to Maui with my wife's family, and it had a great large size, but it's just, it was hurting my back. It was scratching. It wasn't fitting in the overhead because it was just kind of too robust. It's really a I took a long, hard look at this bag because I was like, okay, I thought it was going to be turning out great, but it was just the geometry and the overall structure of it is so thick. I mean, when you go out in the gallery, I hope you put it on or check it out, but I mean, you could punch it or knife it, it'll be fine. It just doesn't fit with the kind of laid back vibe. I'd gone too tough, so I was trying to think, okay, I need to figure out a way to balance casual with tough. And so after this bag, I was confused. Here's the confusion slide. The bag was very functional, but it felt off, and I didn't really know why. It was tough. It was everything. I thought I wanted to make a tough bag. So I took a look at my process and tried to kind of figure out what to do, because I wanted to make sure bag 5 hit all the right points. So my old process was just kind of sketch in my sketchbook, just low fidelity sketches, and then go straight into prototyping after making a cut list. Then testing it by myself, and then getting feedback from local surfers and designers. I decided I needed some sort of evaluative criteria, so I started with criteria in the new process, then I went into sketching, then I went into feedback with local surfers and designers, then I started prototyping, testing, and feedback again. The criteria, things like durable, functional, personal, passionate, historic, local made. I started kind of creating this list of things, those touch points. Okay, check, check, check. And I talked to my dad again about these products in his garage. I'm like, what is it about these that have that kind of, this like feeling about them? And he said, you know, American design is farm ready. It is designed to work, not to look pretty. And I was like, okay, well, that's kind of hard to do. But it's some sort of a balance thing for me that I needed to incorporate this farm ready balance of somehow showing a focus on function. So I looked at kind of elements that are doing this durable, this passionate, things like, you know, the khakis and different stitching methods, the masterpiece, a Japanese logo, Japanese brand, and kind of the way they're incorporating kind of a humble and passionate aspect into their brand. Also things like warranties and signatures on different products that show you that there's a lot of pride in this product, that there is a passion behind the maker. And then also a lot of products had a red element. And this was something, you know, Dickies and Levi's and Vans here in this picture. I think it kind of connotes a feeling of professionalism, that this is a tough product that just has this little hit of color, So I wanted to incorporate a little bit of red too. So I started with these sketches, and I did a few more other than these, but just trying to figure out the function right and get my story together. That was a big thing. Get the story right, get the experience right. And luckily enough, in the Bay Area here, we have a very robust design scene and a lot of bag manufacturers. And I was able to go around and show them my bags and show them my sketches. And a lot of the talk came back to, you know, get your experience right, like get your materials right, get the entire thing kind of working around the idea you want to really present. And it was great to be able to kind of access all these people throughout the process as going into bag number 5. So here it is, bag number 5. And I'm really excited about this bag. I'm really happy. And I hope you get a chance to go check it out in the gallery. It has a roll top cotton canvas used like you used on the last bag for your dry section that goes the length of the bag. It has a nice soft feel to it to be able to hold all your stuff in there. It's waterproof on the outside, so your dry stuff's not going to get wet, but on the inside it has that nice cotton canvas feel. I also changed the logo a little bit. Some of the feedback I was getting was that, you know, Made in Santa Cruz might be more important to me than Made in USA. That speaks to the place, it speaks to the kind of ethos that is going into your product. So I changed it to Made in Santa Cruz. I also added my little red element. There you can see the red redwood, laser cut still, and a beam adhesive on there. The bag also features the zippered front pocket for your small stuff. and the flap, that zippered flap will open up, and you'll see your wetsuit pouch will expandable. I wanted to make sure that I was hiding the technology. Something I talked to the North Face shoe designer, and he was talking a lot about, when you're out in the outdoors and when you're out in that experience, you don't want to be confronted with technology. You don't want to be all these straps hitting you in the face. You want to be enjoying it. So I wanted to try to hide as many of the straps and a lot of the functionality, if I could, when it was in its compressed state. Here it is in its non-compressed state. Wow, look at all that gear on the bottom right. So it fits a ton. The wetsuit pouch, like I said, it's a marsupial type pouch on the with vented mesh sides that it slots in, and then it can fit a large load in that dry pouch, as you can see here also. I tested this on a surf trip down to Santa Cruz. It is ergonomic. It is extra large size, and it's expandable and contractible like those bike bags that I was really liking. And it is easy to use. There is one element that I would like to change in the next iteration, and that's because when you have these two sacks and you're stuffing them with kind of this chunky material, chunky different items, that they'll impact each other. And if you overpack one, then you can't get at the second bag. So I'd want to try to install a thin plastic divider that would allow you then to act like a shoehorn as you jam your stuff in, and so that both pouches can be not impacted. But the feedback I was getting from my friends and from the local servers and from designers that good style, I'd kind of found the right balance between the materials and the form, and it was functional. And they were all kind of getting how you use it and going through the motions and feeling like it would work. And really the most part, and the part I was really stoked about, was that people feeling this is beach ready. It's like it fit in with the beach environment, and that they were excited to bring it to the beach. That was the kind of balance point that I feel I've been working on for such a long time, and actually it was great to hit it. So I appreciate you all coming. Thanks for being here, and I hope you're able to check out the bags out in the gallery, and feel free to take them off, try them on, whatever. Thank you.
Time for half a question.
Yes.
Does anybody have a question for this lady?
Yeah, Mike, how would you apply the methods that you devised for these bags to other design projects?
I think it would be a respect level that I would bring. I think that with local surfers, I respected them already, and I felt that it really helped my design work to be better than previous design projects. And I feel like if I did go into, say, a community that wasn't as involved with, I think that I would be as respectful in terms of the observation, in terms of the talking, in terms of, and I feel that's a good entry point for me as a designer, to be able to talk that way instead of as a subject and a designer.
I'm sorry to cut you short.
No, that's great. I'm glad to be cut short. Thanks,
Nice
Brenda.
job, Mike. This is Catherine Isaacs. She is from Boston. She got her Bachelor of Arts in Anthropology and Art History from Columbia University. Catherine Isaacs from Boston.
And New York.
And New York. A BA in Anthropology and Art History from Columbia. After she worked as what she calls a sentence designer, and by which she means editor, Catherine broadened her practice to include more visual communications, and her thesis work explores design in financial literacy, something I think most of us can relate to. You ready to go?
I'm almost
Almost ready to go? We're almost ready to welcome Catherine Isaacs.
Me. Hi, everyone. Thank you very much for coming to my talk today. I'd also like to thank you for your generosity of spirit in coming to a talk with the word finance in the title. The title of my thesis is Making the Fine Print Legible, Building Financial Literacy Through Games. Unless you think that this thesis is purely altruistic in nature, I would like to tell you a little bit about where it began, and that is with me. I found that when I graduated from college, I was actually very, very ill-equipped to deal with my own finances. There's a lot of reverb going on in here, yeah?
Yeah, it's okay.
Okay.
It sounds worse up there.
Okay. Good to know. I was actually really... ill-equipped to deal with my own finances. I didn't actually know what a good credit card meant. I had no idea how to calculate how much money I should be spending on rent, and I was living in Manhattan, which made that even more complicated. So basically what I decided to do was just to be frugal. And that actually worked for a little while. I just kind of lived a little what I termed ascetic life, and it was working pretty well. And then one month I was actually late on my credit card bill, and I thought that the world was going to end. I thought that I was never going to be able to buy a house. I thought that it was going to be absolutely impossible for me to have a good credit report ever again. But actually all that happened was I had a $35 late fee. So, all those things that I'd heard about, your credit report, not that big a deal. So then I thought, well, I'm just kind of good at stuff, I guess. I just know how to spend my money well. So, took it out for a spin a little bit. I expanded my shoe collection greatly. I also enjoy traveling, and I took a bunch of trips to a bunch of different places. One month I was actually not able to pay off my credit card bill in full as I had been before. And so I looked around at my friends, and I was just like, well, I guess, they carry a balance. I'll carry a bit of a balance for a little while. I'm sure I'll be able to pay it off. And 2 years later, lo and behold, I had about $2,000 in credit card debt, no idea how I'd gotten there, and no idea how to pay it off. So from that point on, I had resolved that financial literacy is essential and not optional to our personal well-being. So then when I came to CCA and I started thinking about my thesis and what I might be exploring, I decided to look for the design opportunities within this concept. I also did a little research into some numbers just to make sure that I wasn't the only one with some financial problems. And it turns out I'm not, which is great. But 74% of teens apparently don't understand credit card interest and fees. And 55% of them don't know how to use a credit card at all. Moving on into college, 91% of college seniors have at least one credit card, and 56% of them have 4 or more credit cards. And that alone isn't actually scary, but if you think about the fact that just a few years ago they didn't actually know how to use a credit card, that could compound into something a little bit scary. Additionally, small business owners use credit cards as a source of financing 44% of the time, and only 51% of Americans have a rainy day fund in case of any sort of calamity. And lastly, household debt as a percentage of annual disposable personal income is at 127%, and that is up from 77% in 1990. So clearly we are spending more and we are showing no signs of stopping. So, how do we normally learn personal finance? The best way is for our parents to teach us. Unfortunately, what if your parents don't know that much about finance? Or what if your parents aren't particularly good parents and don't actually want to talk to you that much? There's all sorts of situations out there that could happen. So I did some research into some alternative methods. And I found that many positive habits are instilled long before kids are actually capable of understanding the reasons. So we should be starting young, ideally 3rd to 5th grade. I also found that in terms of personal finance, causality goes both ways. Proper behavior can be the result of knowledge, but additionally, if you learn proper behavior, that proper behavior can actually affect knowledge acquisition. Additionally, the greatest shortcoming of the human race is apparently our inability to understand the exponential function. And as such, we should be illustrating compound interest, and we should be doing it early. And lastly, real learning is always associated with pleasure and is ultimately a form of play. And therefore, games are an ideal method of this type of learning. So what is play? Play is essentially rehearsal for life. It's a safe space for learning and experimentation, and it's something that's instinctive to humans and animals, and especially to kids. And games can actually provide structure to this play, providing an instructive area for learning, and they operate politically independently. If you make a game, you don't have to get it approved necessarily by the county educational board. So, what do games and finance have in common? Well, they're both systems. Games are systems, finance is a system, and essentially games, one of the reasons they're so great for learning is that they can be perfectly analogous models for various types of systems. So games, again, show up as a really great way to teach finance. And lastly, in terms of the age group that I'm looking at, according to the California state standards, these are the various things that 3rd to 5th graders are learning. They're learning money manipulation, fractions and percentages, they're engaging exponents, and they're working with grids and charts, all of which really factor into financial literacy very well. I also did a ton of primary research. I went to schools, I went to tons of schools. I went to kindergarten through 5th grade classes. I watched them play games, I watched math class, I watched social studies class, and I really tried to pay attention to the things that were engaging the kids in terms of their learning. I also personally played any money game I could get my hands on. It was not that fun because a lot of them out there aren't really that great. Sometimes they're fun and that's great, but they're not necessarily always that rich in the financial knowledge that I was looking for. Additionally, I also played a ton of games that I would just call fun games. This is just a small sampling of them. I played card games, I played tile games, I played board games, I played any type of game you can think of. And who did I play these games with? I played them with my friends. And I found that apparently we never really grow up. Like the kids that I had met with, we really like toys with parts. We like really bright colors. We really like being able to yell. We also were a little bit lazy. We don't want to read the instructions. No one ever wants to read the instructions. So if anyone ever out there wants to make a game, try to just avoid the instructions entirely. We also have some attention issues. Because people knew that I was working on financial literacy games, Monopoly was a hotbed of conversational activity, and people were pretty pleased that I wasn't going to make them play Monopoly because it takes all night. And I frankly have never even finished a game, so there's that. And lastly, that we sometimes actually do like to play nice. That again, in Monopoly, you win by crushing your opponent. And we were playing a more collaborative game, and that actually really appealed to some of my co-players. And I've also been working with various experts in the field. So I've been working with game designers, occupational therapists, and educators in order to be able to make the best game that I can. So, my solutions proposed. I had my research pie piece pretty well set, as I hope I've established for you, but I was also going to be working with all of these different people in order to make this game. And it occurred to me that perhaps I might not be able to make the 1 or even 5 games that would solve all of our economic problems. So perhaps I could also create a system for people to be able to collaborate on financial literacy games. And so these are the 2 projects that I'll be presenting to you. First, my game. So I set out a few goals for myself. I really wanted to concretize the concept of debt. I feel like it's something that we sort of think of as this ethereal concept that we carry around, but don't really think about all that much necessarily. I wanted to illustrate the power of compound interest, as I mentioned about the exponential function, and also my mother thinks that that's very important. I also wanted to make a girl-friendly, casual game. I wanted to have graduated levels as well, so that the game could grow with you. I wanted to have an open source platform, and I wanted to make sure that it was fun, because if the game isn't fun, then no one's playing it, and then no one's learning. So these are some of my earlier attempts to make a game. I started out with these counting systems here on the upper left. And those were basically, I was really trying to engage the idea of building debt along with your assets and seeing where they both sit. I made a couple board games, and I also made a card game down on the bottom right, which I realized was essentially just teaching people to be little tycoons, and that wasn't really what I was looking for. I wasn't looking to make a game that just teaches capitalism. And so while it was not necessarily a successful game, it was actually a really important step in my process because it helped me realize that I'm looking to make a game that teaches skills for survival within a capitalist economy and not necessarily making, as I said, little tycoons. So there's been some useful things in here. And so I went back to those counting methods because I had really found them really generative, and I started making this game. It's got dual counting tracks, one for assets and one for debts, and it's a dice-driven race to the finish game. And special rolls, like if you roll double 2s, you might lose a turn or your score would get multiplied by 2, change up the game a little bit. After I tested it with a few people, I made some refinements. So there are individual tracks for each player, and you win when you reach $50 in assets with 0 debt. You got to be free and clear, like Willy Loman. And when you lose if you accrue $100 in debt. I then tested it with some teachers, and they, really made some good points to me that bright colors are important for kids. So just as they are for my friends. So I made the colors a lot brighter, and I made the board a lot shorter and thicker to accommodate smaller hands. I also made the tracks parallel rather than symmetrical because that was going to be easier, particularly in terms of if kids perhaps were colorblind. It's actually very easy for anyone who's colorblind to be able to color match. So having the parallel tracks was going to be a lot easier. I also added some manipulators in the form of a tally-up zone. And what happens there is anytime any of the players land on a tally-up zone, everyone needs to subtract their own personal debt from their own personal assets. So you're continually encouraged to assess how much money you actually have. Because for me personally, at least, when I have $20 in my pocket, but I owe someone $15, I still feel like I have $20, whereas in reality, I only have $5. So when you tally up, you figure that out, and you get a little bit of a bonus for being able to be the one with the highest net worth. So I also incorporated a few pieces for a little bit more advanced play. These are interest cards, which you would advance every turn. And I made the board a little bit longer to accommodate extra money to play with. So I took the game and I tested it, and it was very, very nerve-wracking, but pretty exciting. I tested it with varied ages and demographics. A 5th grade class in Chicago, a 3rd grade class in Oakland, a 3rd grade class outside Washington, D.C., with a bunch of teachers, as well as just your run-of-the-mill adults. And the question is, did they like it? And the answer is yes. I was so happy they did. So these kids, for instance, in Chicago, they were really, really engaging the vocabulary, which was great. On advice from my on advice from a game designer, they thought that perhaps, debt and assets might be slightly abstract for these kids, but, I was talking with teachers and they were like, no, they can handle it. So, it's going on. And also what was really great was that they were able to connect it on their own to the idea of credit cards and also to propaganda, which they were studying in social studies class. So that was really great. And now I'm going to show you just a little quick video, which I hope will play.
If you want, you can pay it off with your assets, how much money you have. But then also, how do you know if you have debt?
Okay, so I'm not sure how well you were able to hear that, but basically she said, you can pay back your debt with your assets, how much money you have. So she's learning what the vocab means and she's really engaging it. And also she was then asking, how do you know if you have debt? And she meant in real life, how do you know? And that's a really great question. Where do you go to figure that out? There's a billion different places you have to go depending on how many different accounts you have. And this conversation was really getting started and I found that incredibly gratifying. I also took it to a classroom in Oakland, and they had a really great time with it, and they were also really engaging the vocabulary and engaging the competitive spirit of the game. And also to a 3rd grade class in Alexandria, Virginia. And they actually really loved using the words. They wanted to play the game during recess, which I thought was crazy. And then, they also just kept asking each other for the rest of the week, like, hey, what's your net worth, dude? And so that was pretty cool. And but they also really picked up on the concepts that, in order to win, you got to make sure to pay off your debt early. But there were still some opportunities for improvement. In terms of the width of the stripes and being able to move things around, there was still some structural issues for small hands. Also, in terms of rules and language, I thought that if I said, double a number, that would be very clear and kind of conveniently vernacular for kids. But instead, they really got confused by that. But if I said multiply it by 2, they totally understood what I was talking about. And I think it's because at that age, they're learning their mathematical concepts and their vocabulary so specifically. So I changed that a little bit in order to accommodate that. Also to push the compound interest a little bit further and integrate it into the board, because again, no one ever wants to read the rules. And lastly, as you maybe were able to see, the win state was in the center of the board, which just doesn't feel good. And it kind of encouraged people to rack up as much debt as they could just so that they could get to the end. So I went back to the drawing board, as it were, and this is what I came up with. My game is now called It All Adds Up. And I actually separated the boards, which enabled me to put the win state at the end. And then also I was able to incorporate compound interest into the board a little bit better. Additionally, I added in some rainy day funds pursuant to my earlier research, which can block some bad events. So it really helps you remember to have some savings. So in terms of bonus assets and debt penalties, these are really hopefully pushing the idea of the compound interest. So if you pass $10 in assets, you get an extra $1. If you pass $20 in assets, you get an extra $2. So it's secretly compound interest at a rate of 10%. But we're not talking about it. It's just happening. It's behavioral. It's going in there. Debt, on the other hand, it works the exact same way, but it actually is at a rate of 20%, because as in real life, your debt grows generally a lot faster than your assets. I also drew on the game of cribbage and incorporated something that some of you might know called muggins. But basically, if you forget to take your bonus assets by the time you let go of your peg, someone else can yell bonus and they can actually take it from you. So it encourages people to, pay attention, but it also, pay attention to your finances, guys. So, in terms of the feedback for this board, I actually was able to test it with some of the kids who had played the earlier game, which was great. I was a little bit worried that separating the tracks would be confusing because they'd have to have two different things to look at, but it was actually a lot easier for them, so that was really great. I also think that personally I like them being separated because rarely in life do you get your total assets and your total debt given to you on the same bill, so having to check both was pretty reflective of real life. Even better, they remembered the rules from before and were able to tell the difference, when apparently, according to my friend who's a teacher, they rarely remember what she had just told them about 2 seconds ago. So, win for me. Okay, moving on to part 2. Oh, also, the game is available to be played in the gallery, and I also have some smaller prototypes to give away if anyone's interested. I've also been working on a system for collaboration for people to be able to make financial literacy games together, as you might remember from this graphic. And I was working particularly closely with game designers and educators, and these two groups of people are so incredibly passionate about their work and so generous with their time, and it really encouraged me to think about whether or not I could make a system such that this project could live beyond just the scope of my thesis. So I came up with the Financial Literacy Participation House, or Flip House. It's an interactive game or system for collaboration and exchange. It's for adults, not just kids, who are interested in making financial literacy games. And it pulls largely from Clue and Wikipedia, and it has like a house structure, and it also has a user-generated hierarchical structure. So when you're welcomed into the Flip House, there's a few things that you can look into. There's a game overview. You can read about financial literacy a bit. You can also read about the advantages of games. You can also read about my thesis so you can understand some of the origins of Flip House. And download and print and play a copy of It All Adds Up if you like. And then if you want to play, you are entered into the foyer, where you introduce yourself and you create a profile. You write down what your skills are, and those become your shields, and you identify some of your goals within Flip House so that other players can understand a little bit more about you. At that point, you go into the courtyard, where you can either start your own mission or join someone else's mission, or if you like, you want to poke around a little bit more, you can investigate the floor plan and see what's going on in other parts of the house. If you'd like to cook up your own plan, you are welcomed into the kitchen. And there are various people in there in the Gallery of Elders who are happy to help you with your planning. And this is where you would maybe set your broad educational goals and your design goals, figure out what areas of expertise you might really be lacking such that you would need some collaborators. Alternatively, if you'd like to join someone else's team, you can go into the dining room for a project that is already in progress. And then you just get started. So in here we are in the parlor. This is the room where you can tune up your game mechanics. So for instance, right now we'll be working on choosing what platform we want our game to be in. If perhaps you'd like, pardon me. If perhaps you'd like to do a little research before you start, there's some books for you to read, some resources for further reading. And down here is the Gallery of Elders. Each of these people, when they made their profiles, indicated that they're game designers, as you can see by the little club that's on the left of their profile. So perhaps you want to, check out this guy Alex and see what he's up to. Here's a little bit of background about him, and maybe you want to invite him on an adventure. So then you do. And that's basically how the game gets made. And hopefully by the end of it, you will have reached your goal of making a financial literacy game. And these are some of the other rooms that you can enter into. In the solarium, you can set your educational goals a little bit more specifically. In the library, you can add to a games database. In the rec room, you get to play test your game. It's one of the more popular rooms. In the pantry, there's some game templates and examples. And in the craft room, where you can work on your art and design. Also, there's opportunities for leveling up. Each one of these adventures that you go on has varying point levels, and you need points in order to level up within the system. And with points, you actually gain visibility in the portrait gallery, so people are more likely to work with you if you have higher visibility. And you can also gain some administrative authority. So anyone can claim an adventure, but eventually you could be able to create an adventure, edit them, even add a room. Maybe we need a PR room in the Flip House. And eventually, you could even become a site administrator. So, in sum, Flip House is a game, and it is also a system for making games, and it is fun. So far, people are actually really liking it. They really like the idea of being able to collaborate, but outside of the normal just forum and thread structure, and also that it is a game, and so there is some outside motivation. In terms of opportunities for improvement, it's really important to continually reevaluate the game's internal economy. Each adventure has a set point level, but if you don't think that those correspond well, then you're just not going to be buying into the game's general economy at all, so you just won't really play. So that's important to make sure that that's going well. It's also really important to reinforce personal connections, because no matter how passionate you are about financial literacy, making games, or online gaming, you're not going to, people stay in these communities because of the personal connections. So it's very important to be able to reinforce that as often as possible. And lastly, it's important to be able to plan ahead for expansion. So I don't know, maybe I'll make a flip housing community in the future. And so coming up, I'd actually like to take this show on the road. I would really, really like to be able to make the game It All Adds Up. It's been very hard making just a few prototypes, but maybe I could get a slightly larger scale. And I'd also really like to be able to make Flip House and make the site live, and ideally even expand it to beyond just financial literacy to educational games in general. And I'd like to say thank you very much for coming to my talk.
Or requests. Could we have the house lights up a little, please? Thanks. Do you have any questions for this wonderful young woman?
I know, I really just spelled it out for you.
When the students were playing the game,
Yes?
how far did they go in their learning, and how much further would you want to see them go if you were to do like a next level to get all that stuff?
Well, how far they went in their learning, I mean, I only watched the same students play the game like twice because I wanted to get as much variety as I could. But they really were able to, like by the second time they played it, it was actually just amazing how good they were at making sure to pay off their debt at the beginning of their turn, which is when you have to do it. And things I'd like to incorporate are actually, using something like a credit card so that, because they have commented on the fact that credit cards seem like free money, and so being able to focus a little bit more on cards is something that I would really like to be able to incorporate. And I'd love to also tackle something crazy like insurance, which is still a mystery to me too.
Well, I kind of wonder if there isn't an app application for this where you swipe your credit card, you get to swipe your credit card, and then whoever the banker is sends them their statement, and then on their phone they receive this. There's that kind of thing along.
Yeah, I mean, I've been focusing very much on kids, and a board game. I really kind of wanted to keep it non-digital for a few reasons, but I would love to be able to incorporate it into some sort of app, definitely.
Can you say a little bit about the sort of counterpoint to Monopoly, the sort of charity option?
Yes, yeah. There's a few rules of the game that I didn't entirely go into, but there's opportunities for, when you do a certain role or you land in a certain space, you can switch places with someone. And so long as there's more than 2 players, you can choose who you switch places with. So, it depends on whether you're, high stakes playing or if you're actually being a kind player to another person. So perhaps you could bail someone else out of debt a little bit, or alternatively, you could really mess with them. So it does really give you the opportunity to, or there's another role that you can roll. If you roll double 4s, you can give someone $8 in assets. And sometimes, people help out those in need, and sometimes they don't. And it is actually a nice little laboratory for learning how to deal with other people and be a responsible, good citizen. I hope. Yes?
You ended up focusing on young kids, but I wonder, it seems like this would be a really useful game for the high school students who actually don't even know really what a credit card is. I wonder if you think this game would be applicable to those age kids, or would you have to modify it at all?
I mean, it is applicable. As a 30-year-old, I enjoy playing it. as do others. But the reason I focused so much on younger kids was because, according to some scholarly research, if you receive financial literacy training in high school, it's often a little bit too late, actually. So it could be useful for them, and I do think they would enjoy playing it. You know, maybe I could have some slight tweaks here and there to make it a little bit more, you know, culturally relevant or something. But technically, you know, according to my research, it's too late in high school, but I'd like to think that it's never too late. So, yeah, I don't necessarily think it's tailored just for kids that young. I just wanted to make sure it wasn't tailored for kids who were a lot older, because most financial literacy games at this point are for about 12 and up, and they have a lot of really specific words in it, like T-bills and things like that. And when you don't know, like, what debt is or assets is, then, like, how are you going to talk about T-bills? So I really was focusing on getting it started as early as possible. But you got to start somewhere at any age. So.
Hopefully you'll be doing a health insurance scheme these days.
Oh my God, I need to do that just for myself, because like I still don't know. So.
Thank you a lot.
Thank you.
While he's setting up, I'd like to introduce Zachary Gibson. This is Zachary. You got fans out there, buddy. Zach was born and raised in the suburbs of Philadelphia, and yet here he is. He earned his BFA in graphic and interactive design from Tyler School of Art at Temple University. And for 3 years prior to the grad design program here at CCA, Zach was art director at Studio No. 1 in Los Angeles. His thesis work rests on the fragile line between what is public and what is private within the hyper-connected participatory age of digital information. So Zachary, again, talking to us about the edge between the public and the private in hyper-connected participatory age of digital media.
It's something like that. It's a little confusing.
And those are all big, really impressive words. Welcome, Zach Gibson.
Hi. Hi. I'm Zach Gibson. It says, and I'd like to provide a little bit of an additional introduction. In my work as a graphic designer, I've been fortunate enough to stay true to the rebellious counterculture spirit of my youth. About 10 years ago, I was introduced to graphic design through skateboarding, through snowboarding, and graffiti and screen printing. As part of a co-op program offered by my high school to get hands-on training in a technical field, I used graphic design as an excuse to skip class and go screen printing at a screen printing shop that I worked at. We printed Little League baseball uniforms and apparel for the local skate shop that I worked at nights and weekends. In my BFA studies, I was trained by a graphic designer, a team of graphic designers, Alice Druding and Joe Scorstone, who are best known for their political posters like this one here, which is called Alternatives to War. For 3 years, I worked as a designer and an art director for Shepard Fairey, the street artist. And I witnessed a precarious balance between being a politically motivated artist and a designer trying to run a business. Long days in the office were followed by long nights bombing the streets. And through this past experience, I've developed a set of core values. Graphic design is intrinsically linked to culture and is a social practice. It facilitates and empowers the voice of a community, the collective voice of a community. Graphic design can be used as a method of initiating subversive research tactics. Graphic design is political, it is rebellious, reflective, curious, and inherently participatory. But what I've come to learn through my thesis work is that graphic design is also a paradoxical practice, one in which the solution to a problem only brings forth more problems that want to be solved. And so I cannot frame the culmination of my work here as an equation with a problem on one side and a nicely neat packaged solution on the other. It's more in this fashion that I've done my thesis work. It's called particular material, and what I've been doing is developing a methodology that allows me to focus on a few particular materials located within the multiple dimensions of this single inquiry. In the age of digital information, Are we losing a physical connection with people, a sentimental connection with the things that we're confronted with, and a sensuous connection to the space around us? And if so, does our relentless participation with the digital world and the fact that it's constantly making our private lives public help us to feel more connected? So there's two parts to this inquiry. There's participation, and there's this battle between the public and what is private. So why participation? The historical progress of an aesthetic experience has led us to a conversation which primarily concerns the role of the active spectator within the age of digital information. And I can pause while you guys tweet that. My thesis work explores what this means, what it means to be an active spectator participating in a world that is in a digital world that is part of our everyday life. So person to person, person to object, and person to place. These are the three categories that I've examined. All of it in an attempt to begin to answer this question. In the age of digital information, are we losing a connection to people, the things, and the space around us? And these are the sort of relationships that we seek to understand in both the physical and digital worlds that we are witnesses of and participants within. So I've considered that by establishing this question as, are we losing, that I may be showcasing a little bit of my politics here and forcing this exploration to be one-sided. And maybe this is true, but it also tends to be an assumption of mine that we're not, or an assumption of most, that we're not gaining from these sorts of relationships in the digital age. It's easy to see that friends are being replaced by followers, books are replaced by readers, paper is replaced by Word docs, writing essays and stories are thought of as content used to generate ad revenue. We walked with our eyes aimed at our smart devices rather than notice the world that we walk through. Social interactions are mediated by Wi-Fi networks. We prioritize artificial intelligence over common sense, the image of the thing over the thing itself, and ourselves over our neighbors. In the age of digital information, we've delineated two communities. There's those who create content and those who consume content. And my assumption toward the beginning of my thesis is that one is active, creating content, and the other is passive, consuming content. This is an ideology inspired by Guy Debord's essay, Society of the Spectator, where we are all passive spectators looking at an illusion. But what I've come to understand through the philosophy of Jacques Rancière and his essay, The Emancipated Spectator, and my own personal experiments is that both of these are active, participatory roles in our digital and physical landscape. So I believe that this can go both ways. We can both lose and gain these sorts of relationships with people and places and things. And I just think it's in the particulars of an individual experiment as to whether this is a good thing or a bad thing, and that through my thesis work, maybe people will be able to see this confrontation and choose a side of their own. So the second part of my thesis work is this battle, this fragile line between what is public and what is private in this hyper-connected world. So it attempts to answer, does our participation within the digital age of information help to define or blur this line between what is private and what is public? A baby laughs at a mom blowing her nose, and 17,417,999 people also laugh. And so does our relentless participation and the fact that we're making our private lives more public help to make us feel more connected in some way? So I've categorized the aspects of this battle into three areas of interest. There's identity, which is our public personas through new technology and social networking sites versus our expectations of privacy within them. There's property, highlighting the battle between the commons and private enterprise when it comes to the ownership of content. And there's authorship. What sort of image making do we prioritize in this new age? A collective response, or the public, or an autonomous response, which is, I consider, the private. So it's the participatory nature of the digital age that I see as creating this public versus private dilemma. And my thesis work exists within this framework, which I rely on to come up with questions and design experiments that concern a particular material located somewhere within this crisscrossing of lines. So the website that I've designed, I designed a website, and it functions as a participatory breeding ground of these investigations, particularmaterial.com. And little self-promo. The site archives task-based submissions. So on the left here, you can see there's 10 different tasks that the users can click through and check out. And in this presentation here, I'm going to talk about just a few of them. So this task here that we're looking at is called stock moments. And the task, which is above this red bar, is to create a stock image similar to the simple pleasures section of Getty Images. So just to show you a few photos from the simple pleasures section, here's a little boy wearing a sweater that I'm jealous of, and standing in front of a pleasant-looking wallpaper with his hair neatly combed to the side, and while he extends the eyeballs from his slinky-like spectacles, which I'm also jealous of. We catch someone in the act of drawing a heart on a steamed-up mirror after taking a bubble bath. A happy couple lies in bed draped in lace, with food on their laps, coffee and OJ in their hands. The man's mouth is open just a bit as if he's saying, wouldn't it be great if we actually knew each other, if we were actually on a vacation and we weren't just hired to come onto this Pottery Barn set? Isn't it preposterous to think of the private moments that we have with the people that we love as rights managed and sold for profit? This is what I consider to be a corporate invasion of everyday life. And in an effort to hijack this, the goal here is to develop an archive of photos similar to this simple pleasures section and provide them to the public for free under Creative Commons licensing. And it says exactly that blurb right there. So these are some of the submissions that I got. A group of friends has an ice cream sundae party. A single yellow flower on the hood of a car in morning dew. A friend poses as he leaps off of a diving board. So particular material, the website is a breeding ground of these investigations of a sort of way of thinking. And the idea being that also that if something were to catch on, it could spin off into a project of its own. So perhaps you could imagine a website starting similar to Getty Images, but all of the images are free and provided under the Creative Commons licensing. And while I see that as having a lot of potential, it has so far been an unsuccessful task in the amount of people willing to participate. In the past 2 months, I've only gotten 4 photos added to this archive, and that's not much of a threat to Getty Images. But what I'm able to do with this failure of this task is develop a methodology of participation by making a few assumptions and criticizing this experience. Maybe people are confused by the political undertone of this statement, or maybe that sort of understanding needs to come through the experimentation itself and not in a didactic way before the experiment. Maybe people are intimidated by the lack of skill, like taking an amazing photograph. The stock moments task is rooted in a person-to-person relationship and deals with property and authorship, relating back to my framework. And within that framework, I can consider shifting the experiment around to a person-to-object relationship. And this sort of shifting around leads to another task. This one is called the translator. Participants are encouraged to read an excerpt from a book aloud into an application on their mobile device that translates voice to text. The translated reading is then archived on the website. With this task, I've modified a few things. I've left out my political motivations for the inquiry, and I'm only asking people to read to their phones. So, for example, this is a transcript of a reading of Roland Barthes' Empire of Signs that was submitted to the site. So, while the participant may think what they've done is completely innocent, this is actually quite a political act, and it challenges a few preposterous copyright laws, like being prohibited from reading aloud. For example, Also, this person-object task begins to deal with the notion of appropriation. This text has gone from Roland Barthes through the participant to the voice and into an iPhone app and back to this text in the distorted form of the original. So I'm curious of who owns this bastardized text now, and where's the line between what is appropriation and what is copyright infringement, and has participation made this privately owned text public? And so this task, after a short amount of time, I quadrupled the amount of submissions, and recognizing that something was present here, I wanted to probe it a little bit further. So what I'm doing in this picture here that you can see is while people are reading in their own homes, in the privacy of their own homes, and emailing me text, this was a physical iteration of that. So a variation in that it's a public spectacle of this process. So I grabbed a stack of books that were on my own desk concerning the philosophical discourse of aesthetics and put them out on a stool here in the nave out here, and had people read to their phones aloud. While reading aloud in a public place, which may or may not be this weird copyright infringement, I was also broadcasting the situation on the monitor there live throughout the internet. So this is something that I was really fascinated by, looking at these pictures and considering this like reading to the internet as we may read to a child, giving back to it a small amount of what it has given to us. There's something that I liked about that. There's another task. It's called Out the Window. Again, a very simple task. Record a video looking out of your window for a few minutes. A subtitle reads, which isn't up there, but a subtitle reads, "Out the Window archives the mundane moments of our lives, moments when we take the time to just observe." So these are a few of the submissions that I received, and when I first started with this task and getting submissions for this, I was considering this as a passive act. In the digital world of content creators, here are people just looking, and but what I've come to realize with this is that there's a little bit of an error in that judgment, and freezing up a little bit. But what I've come to realize is that these mundane observations are actually document an active spectator, one who is contemplating their position in the physical world and retaining a trace of their engagement with it through publicizing their documentation for others to witness. So a similar task calls upon the same sort of finding, except instead of witnessing an environment, one is a witness of themselves in an anonymous space. In spaces designed to be passed through without any recognition, where we are supposed to check our identities at the door. There we are, watching ourselves, wondering who else may be watching what we're watching, where we're not supposed to be seen at all. So another task, on to the next one. This task examines a person-to-person relationship, and it challenges our identity, our expectations of privacy within a public place like Facebook. So while most of the things that I've shown up to this point have relied primarily on others to explore within the guidelines that I've designed, with this task I've taken a personal interest. And because of this, there's sort of a strange phenomenon that's been taking place. So the task, again, is simple. Create a portrait of a Facebook friend whom you've never met. So here's how this works. These are three profile pictures of Facebook friends that I have that I've never met. And on the left here is Jose. He's a gallery curator in Mexico. In the middle is Adam Cruces, I think he's like a weird internet artist guy. And on the right is Hack Avion, who I don't know how we're friends, but somehow we're friends on Facebook. And first of all, the first thing that I'm curious about is who owns these photos, right? Is it Facebook? Is it the user, the photographer, or is it me because we're friends and friends share with each other? And so, so I redraw the profile pictures and I repost them to Facebook and I tag the people in the photos. And the response has been weird. It's some people just push the like button and they move on. This is a pretty awesome rat tail that this guy had. Some people are totally creeped out by this invasion of what they thought were private photos, and in response have unfriended me. Like Al Millman in the middle here, for example, asked that I please remove the picture that I drew of him. He also sent me a private message telling me how much he disliked the portrait that I drew of him. So how do I respond to this? This was my first reaction. It was, I will vandalize the portrait that I drew of you, and I will repost this and see what happens. But I wussed out a little bit, and I opted for something a little bit more subtle and just posted this: Al Millman and I are unfriended, amongst a bunch of other portraits that says this person and I are friends and this person and I are friends. So. Al, if you're in the audience here, I can send you a new friend request and we can try and start over. I'm totally down. So some people are also totally flattered by the unexpected connection that we now have. And I'm not quite sure, again, how Anita Culp and I became friends, but after I drew this portrait of her, she's taken a pretty, an actual interest in my life. And she likes my photographs, she comments on them, and she's even congratulated me for graduating school. And somehow through her unwitting participation in this project, and through me taking a somewhat private photo of her childhood, and she got a troll as a gift, and making it quite public, we've developed a real connection and have become friends. And actually, Anita's sister also recently friended me, which is funny. So some complete strangers have friended me and ask that I do them. And Jeff Koons and I are friends, which I'm flattered by seeing this on Jeff Koons as well, that he's in my album. If you don't know who Jeff Koons is, he's an artist guy. So I've set out to do portraits of all of the Facebook friends that I've never met. And yes, there's a lot of them, because whenever Facebook suggests that I should befriend someone new, I'm one to say, okay, sure, and I click the button and have a bunch of new friends. But also in terms of property, I'm curious what happens to these if I turn them into paintings or screen prints or put them in a gallery out here and sell them perhaps. Will these people want a cut of the profit that I make? Will Zuckerberg hit me up for his percentage of participation in the project? I'm just a little bit curious about that. And I bought Facebook friendsI'venevermet.com, which I'm going to get up and running soon for those of you also interested. And I've also been exploring a little bit with stylistic revisions, maybe getting a little more abstract and trying to aggravate people a little more. And all along the audience of particular material has been invited to participate in this experiment with me and maybe possibly have the same sort of interactions. So this is a submission to the website by this guy in Portland who, if you go on the website, this actually animates and the hot dog spins around in circles like this. So while I'm doing this, I'm looking at my autonomous study of this, but also inviting all of this collective response. So in the age of digital information, are we losing a physical connection with people, a sentimental connection with the things we're confronted with, and a sensuous connection with the space around us? And if so, does our relentless participation in the digital world and the fact that we're constantly making our private lives more public help us to feel more connected? My thesis work doesn't aim to come up with a solution to this huge question, rather just explore within it. And what I've designed is a way in, a way to examine our everyday lives as we seamlessly and effortlessly transition between the physical and digital world, a way to frame and experiment with a particular material found within this inquiry. So a baby laughs and 18 million people laugh too. And a person comes to a gallery and looks at a portrait of himself drawn by a stranger whom he calls a friend. A stranger sticks their hand out the window of a moving car, and everyone watching can sort of feel the breeze. So with this, thank you very much for having me. questions. We've already met. There's a few little weird predicaments that I've run in. Like, if I happen to meet one of these people after I've done this, I haven't quite figured out what to do yet. Like, do I take it down or? So I can't do you. We've met. Yeah. Yeah.
Will your website continue after?
I think so. There'll definitely be parts of it that will. I definitely want to go through and revise it, and so that there's more. So I'm curating it a little bit more than what I have up there now. But yes, I think so. Yeah.
Time for one more question.
What's the name of your website again?
It's called particularmaterial.com.
How do you make that portrait?
I draw them in Illustrator using a Wacom tablet. I don't know if it's actually called Wacom, but I like to say that. So.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
This is Sean Ross. Sean is a multidisciplinary designer with over 13 years of experience in online interactive. He's worked with companies ranging from obscure startups to more established companies like eBay and Yahoo. He's created superior user experience design, marketing campaigns, and brand positioning. He's also an independent musician, a sound designer, with tracks being played on stations such as Soma FM. His thesis at CCA deals with the dematerialization of music and crosses boundaries between visual and sound design. I love what I've seen as I've watched this man grow and develop, and I'm really grateful for the opportunity. Please welcome Sean Ross.
Thanks, Brenda. Thank you all for coming tonight. Before I give my talk, I'd like to take a moment to give thanks, first and foremost, to my family, without whose sacrifice, love, and support, I'm not sure I'd be standing at this podium today. Allison, Minette, Gabe, Mom, Andre, if you guys are out there, I love all you guys. Thank you so much. Secondly, to the CCA faculty, Martin Vineski, whose guidance, encouragement, and integrity are in a class by itself. Thank you so much for helping me to open so many new avenues to my creativity and for your sense of humor and your intellect. Guillermo Galindo, you're a friend and a mentor. Leslie, Brenda, Barry, you've each given me key pieces to this puzzle right when I needed them. I've been blessed with your mentorship and your kindness. Thank you. Additionally, to all my colleagues, I've learned from each and every one of you, and you're all incredibly talented and uniquely special. Thank you for surviving this experience and for thriving and arriving here with me. Playback, case studies and strategies for the reinvention of physical media. From the early to mid-19th century, the human race has been enchanted with, perhaps even hypnotized by, our technological ability to record and play back images and sound, to create permanent record of our individual and collective experiences distilled to pure sensorial information. Media is the name given to this ever-changing technology, which affords us a powerful mirror of ourselves and our culture. I'm interested in bringing some of the lost qualities of the digital age back, the lost qualities of the analog age, which we seem to have lost, back into the digital age. That of materiality, physicality, tactility, intentionality, personality, permanence, and playfulness. My thesis aims to serve as a critical analysis of culture and commerce in our digitally mediated and dematerialized era, as well as dive deeply into a formal and methodological series of process-driven investigations that explore the re-embodiment of tactile, analog nature in parallel realms of sound and vision. I wanted to make a quick note. There are several different thesis models here in the grad program at CCA. Mine is what is known as formal methodological, which comes out of Form Studios. Its primary concern is the development of design process and involves the research and development into new methods of working with aesthetics on a formal level. Formalism is largely concerned with the investigation into natural phenomena and utilizing these results in design process. Although my thesis deals with possible applications in the real world of commerce, this is not the primary focus. I first became interested in the problem of music losing its physical form, which happened gradually with the transition from the vinyl record to the CD, and finally dematerialized altogether with all data moving into the cloud, making music even more ephemeral and disposable. This has actually happened with all media, in a similar way that many designers love the printed book and hold the mark on the page as the best possible staging ground for their work. I hold the vinyl LP in similar regard. I was inspired a great deal by Marshall McLuhan's theories about media. McLuhan has pointed out that before the advent of the Gutenberg printing press, mankind led a more balanced existence because hearing was privileged over seeing. He says, acoustic space is organic and integral, perceived through the simultaneous interplay of all the senses, whereas rational or pictorial space is uniform, sequential, and continuous, and creates a closed world with none of the rich resonance of the tribal echoland. McLuhan believed that the revolution in electronic communication would ultimately return us to our balanced, connected tribal roots. What I take from McLuhan that seems hyper-relevant to this project is the idea that our culture currently seems to privilege the visual over most every other means of communication. As a result, our culture is way oversaturated and overstimulated in this way. When you favor one sensory input over all the others, you become imbalanced, which creates fragmentation and detachment. I believe there are opportunities for designers to utilize all the senses of the body in more holistic ways. During pre-search, I began investigations in several different areas of playback media. First was involving the formal nature and qualities of the vinyl LP, chosen for its analog tactile nature, as well as its formal qualities as an artifact that engaged both the ear and the eye simultaneously. I investigated the intrinsic visual properties of this media and what was possible, cutting it, reshaping it, painting, and drawing with it. And lastly, creating a set of one-of-a-kind lathe-cut records, which investigated the potentials of live, unedited performance using musical and non-musical objects in a primitive, noise-based conversation between humans and machines. My goals were to find ways for these two senses to speak to one another using formal attributes which correlate, sound in the time domain and image in the spatial realm. I began looking at ways that I might deal with the sharing of common language between image and sound. I arrived at the possibility of using gesture as a bridge. However, I quickly abandoned this, realizing its nature as somewhat arbitrary and subject to interpretation. Aspects of my critique against digital means of operating had to do with not wanting any falseness to occur. I therefore opted for a purely formal approach to discovery, setting out to find ways to generate both visuals and sound in parallel. My initial investigations began by taking a forensic look into the properties of various media. I used the turntable itself as a primitive drawing instrument and the vinyl record as a method of printmaking. Notions of physicality, transfer, degradation, low and high fidelity, the differences between asynchronous and analog signals and information. I imagine the sounds in the spiral of the record to be shapes of the musical grid, a spiral as the mechanical means of creating a grid of time. I became interested in the shared language of these machines, the roundness of the mechanisms which kept the linear movement of the content moving through its various stations, the playhead which took the magnetic particles arranged just so and transforming them into sound waves. I reimagined the boombox as a kind of Stone Age hieroglyph. In the same way primitive man wrote on walls in order to tell his story, I imagined its role in the forming of hip-hop culture, the physical presence and sonic magnitude it afforded, the smooth montage allowed by the mechanism of the pause button, which created a universe of new possibilities. I examined the balance of the personally mediated into the mass-mediated culture and the concept of the hit corresponding to the actual physical nature of sound itself. I became fascinated for a time with piano rolls, the computer punch card-like scrolls that player pianos use as a way to connote digital information. I found it interesting that a purely physical property such as holes cut into paper would immediately resonate as immaterial in today's context. I began deconstructing and then reconstructing media objects in order to entertain the notions that physical media can continue to take on new forms of pure delight. Here are some of the tools that I used for analog or real-world non-digital image making and sound making processes. A light table, a microphone, analog synthesizer, glass plates, inks, and marbles. My first study with sound and image was actually a serial process, first creating a sound piece and then creating a visual piece while listening to the sound. I would later come back to this as a truly parallel process, but I had to complete this step in order to understand that I was still operating on deeply ingrained habits of separating these two modes of working and then layering one on top of the other. These processes began to cross-pollinate with the making of my thesis book and type studies. Using handmade and mechanical processes such as imperfectly hand-cut letters and manual typewriters, which allowed the modulation of pressure to create subtle nuances and variation similar to a musical instrument. Using music-related ephemera from sources such as photographs taken at record stores and a trip to the library, I began to combine my formal studies with media objects, my handmade cutout type, and studies with manual typewriter to create a holistically unified approach to type and image which works to form a visual language of analog playback culture. Here are some select spreads and layouts from my book. This is an alphabet made up of type from album covers. I also conducted research in the form of informal interviews with several people of interest to me who are in the music industry. This is a spread from an interview I did with Eric Mast, who runs a record label out of Portland called Audio Dregs. This is a colleague of mine, Rusty Hodge of Soma FM. This uses a hard drive. Mark Neustetter is my guitar teacher. Continuing with my investigations into media, I began a new series of lathe-cut records, this time playing with the notion of the analog playlist and records that can be combined in performance to be used as an instrument. I created two concepts, one which has several records that are like concentric rings which interlock, and the other has 4 records which stack one on top of the other and play from the inside out, dropping down the steps to get to the next record as it plays. I began truly parallel processes of creating image and sound together. Here's an example of using BBs on the guitar with various inks in order to draw while making sound. Next up is a video of my additional investigations with parallel process.
This is the end. beautiful crowd.
And he looked inside.
Initially, my plan was to bring these discrete moments that I had collected into an application I designed for the real-time layering and performance of audiovisual media in a performance context. I wanted a way to compose and design with these clips and to play them like a DJ samples, creating new combinations which would allow these moments to interact. However, I became confronted with the aesthetic of digital and the cool and groovy affectation it seems to impart to everything, like a lava lamp or a trippy screensaver. I began to value these moments more by themselves, and I wondered if instead of collecting these clips to be ground up into digital fodder for the machine, might I just be content to allow them space to be themselves. I still struggle with this. My plans moving forward are to strike some kind of balance between the notions of composition and creativity with the fundamental discoveries and strategies of capturing sound and image together as they truly are in the wild. My next and final iteration attempts to compose using this process. So back to the vinyl LP for a moment. I wanted a way to reinvent the LP record for the digital age as a kind of reaction to the ephemeral nature of digital media. I came up with an idea similar to Blurb, which would allow for one-off publishing of physical media. Interestingly, vinyl sales grew 14% in 2010, while the sales of CDs are falling like a stone. While LP records still account for less than 1% overall sales, this does show that people still desire the analog artifact, and not just nostalgia buffs. Make Your Own Damn Record combines the best of analog and digital cultures, and perhaps a new model for record companies. It would allow everyone to produce unique one-off vinyl records, innovating on form and function, and continuing to push forward a medium that has traditionally been locked by the gatekeepers of big media conglomerates. The market for new music is primarily driven by youth culture, with Generation Y comprising the largest demographic for music today at over 80 million individuals worldwide. These young folks value individual self-expression and authenticity. The interest in vintage analog culture and objects that they didn't grow up with is perhaps a reaction against the perfection and consumerist ideology of digital things. There's a pendulum swing amongst young adults away from the mass-marketed and mass-produced, exemplified by the lo-fi DIY culture, which encompasses everything from Etsy to zines to blogs. These images are from an Urban Outfitters catalog, and these aren't just props. These things are for sale: film cameras and record players. An early prototype dealt with a potential difficulty in asking people to reintroduce the turntable into their home. Its tendency to take up a large amount of space, and people might not want that. So I designed a concept which would play a picture disc in a simple plexiglass frame, which you could hang on your wall. The simple idea being that vinyl is an object of beauty to be seen and heard. I also wanted to explore the idea of media being intensely personal, so I worked with a friend of mine and his family to create a family song which was made into a record. I asked them to draw one another as a way to combine the processes of sound and image making in hopes to screen print the images on the record itself and then hang it in their home as an archival keepsake. Here's a little clip of the song that they wrote.
Are annoying at certain times that include now.
And here I'll walk you through my making of prototypes for this idea of the record as a visual work of art. The process for making one-off lathe cuts is a bit different than traditional records, which are vinyl and are pressed from a copper master plate known as a mother. These, however, are made by directly etching the sound wave in real time on a spinning lathe by a diamond cutter directly into polycarbonate, which is a form of plastic, not vinyl, and it is much softer, which is why you can do that. So I sourced clear polycarbonate in order to be able to paint one side of it and have the design show through to the side that is playable. These are one-sided records, so that when you play it, you see the design, which is on the other side of the disc, showing through. This is me painting glow-in-the-dark paint directly on the record as it spins on a turntable. My plans for these were to do something more elaborate, like screen print on them, but things got down to the wire with regard to time, so I ended up defaulting back to my favorite thing to use in a pinch, spray paint. I made some quick stencils, and some of them I just did freehand. Here's one with just a few quick sprays applied. And then these are some of the final designs. These records are all playable and have music on them. In closing, I believe in the power of media to be both intensely personal and meaningful. I think that as we move further into the digital age, it becomes imperative to develop processes that utilize the relationships between the mind and hands and the eyes and ears. For many years, I had abandoned these things, but I think I always longed for them, and I'm glad I found them again. Thank you very much for coming tonight.
going to play some of the stuff in the gallery? Is there a moment when we can?
The films are on loop, and then there's a record in the gallery that you can turn on and play. Yeah.
We'll be playing a couple of these films after that.
What's the lifespan of the polycarbonate records?
I'm not sure about the lifespan, but I know that they're not as durable as vinyl, just because they're softer. So they have a certain amount of plays before they disintegrate. But from what I've been told, the sort of lathe cut subculture is so vibrant, and there's such a demand for this that these guys have gotten really, really good at making them better and better in terms of both sound quality and longevity.
Our daughter gave us a Grateful Dead album a while back, knowing that we didn't have a turntable, because she thought we'd just like to have it. How much of this is, do you think, sort of fetishizing the object as opposed to really seeing it as a medium that contains sound?
I think all cool stuff gets fetishized. So I think that's like walking into a bear trap to try to answer that question. But I think for my interest in the record, like I grew up with records, but actually I grew up more with tapes than records. So, and I didn't even really as a teenager or a young adult have a lot of records because I preferred the portability of cassettes and I liked to bootleg stuff from my friends, and records were just more of a pain. But I think the reason why I was drawn to the record for this project is because I was looking for a canvas to combine my love of audio with my love of the image, and I feel that the record as an artifact really represents the sort of golden age of graphic design in music in terms of its size and its physicality. So that's why I was interested in it for this.
All right, then, well, with this, we have now completed